instances where the political steps out of line and they need to be checked, right? For sure. Let's replace some people. Let's even replace the system of governance. What no one's really done, for the most part, are very few. I won't say no one. Very, very, very few. I mean, of the population of academic writers who publish academically at an advanced level, not like bubblegum academic. I mean, like dense academic. Less than, I don't know the stats, but I would say less than 3 or 4% might argue the position that I'm going to argue, is that the social is a threat to the political. It's all, we understand the relationship between the social. I'm a conflict resolutionist by profession. This is what I do professionally, right? I confer, along with my colleagues in the institution, the highest level of education that you can get, a PhD, to my students based on an analysis of conflict. So I think I know what I'm talking about. The social is a threat to the political. It's not just that the political's a threat, the political's a threat, okay man, wow, we're still writing on that? I mean, cool, that's cool, let's keep on writing about that, that's cool, okay, sure. Is anyone going to do something? That's what I'm doing. That's all I write about. It's how the social threatens the political. How does the social threaten the political? The stratified interest of the social that find its way into the political then inform the next cycle of threat from the political. So the idea to say that it's just the political is a threat fails to recognize how the political becomes a threat. The political becomes a threat because the social threatens the political. Right? The fact that the political lacks a particular representation, and the fact that an individual member of society, an individual human being, can make this meta-level recognition and coalesce members of a population in order to put him or herself into the political, to make legislation and laws and bills and blah, 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 to inform the interests of his community. Well, what if the interests of his community don't align with the rest of society at large? There's a huge potential. You think, and I hate, they always say, you failed, and your discussion has run its course when you start to talk about the Nazis, right? But, I think people, it's so profoundly simple, too. I think people fail to recognize that a dude like Adolf Hitler is a dude. He's like a dude. Adolf Hitler, he's like anybody else. What made Adolf Hitler so powerful is his overwhelming stature, his great moral character, his profound good health. No, Adolf Hitler became the power that he was is because Adolf Hitler had that level recognition. Now, granted, there's so much that I'm leaving out of this because I wouldn't put it out in the public because it would empower the wrong people. And I'm not about that. I will write about this academically because, no one's going to rifle through freaking 300, 400 pages worth of dense text to find one sentence on some arbitrary page that really puts it all into perspective. But a dude like Adolf Hitler understood this as an individual, and he infused himself into the political, and it's sort of like Transformers in a sense, right? It's like, I'm weak as an individual, so I put on layers of power in order to make myself stronger. So that when I emerge back, when I reintegrate myself into the social, I come back to the social not as an individual man, Jason Campbell. I come back to the social now with all of this political bureaucratized machinery all around me, and it moves when I tell it to move. You gotta be a pretty insightful person, sadistic person too, in order to make that recognition. Because if you make that recognition and you are able, all conditional claims, right, and conjunctive, if you make that recognition and you are able to conform political will to your personal will, so that political will bends to the will of an individual, it's over. It's over. There isn't any more power that can be had. That is the most powerful position that could be conceived of, right? The political will as individual will is the ultimate power. It is the ultimate power in human terms, right? We're not talking about transcendental sort of omnipotence. In terms of a human being, the greatest power of any human being that could conceivably be manifest And trust me, I know what I'm talking about. You've read my Will to Power. But will to power is really the will of the individual in a generalized sense. Right? You take that very charismatic, very powerful, very influential, very persuasive will, and you mobilize that will around itself such that the political will becomes itself a representation of the individual will. Think about what the socialists just infused the political will. The socialists just contaminated the damn political will. Right? The political will now is contaminated by this parasitic individual or group of individuals that now are mobilizing and transforming the political. Oh, I don't know if you guys are even going to appreciate what I'm freaking saying. Thinking about, just think about what I said in the last video, right? In the first hour of the installment. Wrap your mind around that. I'm not gonna say any more. Right? I'll let you do some inferential reasoning. Anywho, both. And then, or both, right? It's both, right? There's an internal conflict, there's an external conflict, there is an internal and external conflict, right? There's the conditional and the conjunctive, right? There is that threatening problem. I'm running out of time again. Whew. All right, a realistic approach to balancing complex interests, right? So the question is, how do we really go about balancing these complex interests? Oh, just one quick, and also not just in terms of before I go on, it just hit me. Not just in terms of Nietzsche and his discourse on will to power, but my very first lecture series, which was rudimentary as hell, but Jose Ortega y Gasset's discourse on the masked man, right? The masked man becomes political. Right, the masked man, but the masked man is precisely that. I mean, Gasset is ridiculous on that, right? The masked man enters the political for those purposes, right? And the idea is, and we're talking about an individual, but we're also talking about a group of individuals, right, that infiltrate the political from the social. They come from the social into the political to infiltrate the political to their will, right? So that the will of the political now no longer is a homogenized representation of the mass, the public, but of the mass man as individual will. Thus, the political will bends to the will of the individual. That, you can't have more power than that. That is the most powerful position in the world, right? That is the most powerful position. It's not to say that that position is necessarily bad at all times. Right? It's just really freaking powerful, right? It is the most powerful. There is the ruler of the world. If there is a ruler of the world, cannot call him or herself the ruler of the world unless his will or her will as individual, or if we're talking about a collective, or God forbid a corporation. God forbid a corporation. The will of the corporation, the will of, think about it, if the political will bends to those external forces, then it ultimately doesn't have the strongest will, right? So that if we're talking about the will to power, if there is this instance, and there is, Adolf Hitler is the incarnate proof of this, that the individual can bend the will of the political, then we had better watch out for that. We had better really understand what that means, which is why I've done, 50 plus hours on such a will, right? Not to say that it's necessarily a bad thing, because I think it could be obviously the force for the greatest good as well. It depends on who this person is and what their will is, or who this collective of people are and what their will is, what have you. If it was a corporation, though, that would be scary. I can't think of. I think corporations should be in the business of making ridiculous money, but to be making ridiculous money is different from having, that much power. I think that could be problematic. So rather insightfully, Lasky notes, quote, "But when the internal history of the state is examined internally, its supposed unity of purpose and of effort sinks with acquiescence into nothingness." Precisely why I said it's Nietzschean, right? Because this uniformed unity of purpose and goal direction assumes a homogeneous political will, which sometimes we can get agreement. They'll say bipartisanship is blah, 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 blah. But bipartisanship is different from uniformity, right? Bipartisanship is not uniformity. Even if everybody votes for it, literally, if everybody votes for exactly the same thing, it's still not uniformity, right? Because there is an ability to There is an ability to, oh, Jason, I never, ever lack words to, oh my God, what's the word? I cannot believe I freaking don't know the word. I know the word, but to disagree, I guess, in a sort of colloquial sense. There's an ability to disagree, right? Insofar as there's an ability to disagree, right, we're not talking about sort of like ideological uniformity, right? If there is no ability to disagree, now we got the proper fascist state, right? Because disagreement is not an option, like literally, right? The ability to, and to be honest with you, I don't know what's going on in North Korea, but I saw this thing on North Korea the other day where they said they staged the execution of 30 officials. Holy crap, right? That looks like but obviously that's a state of affairs where the political will is manifest in one individual, right? I mean, that really is the case. From my understanding of just Yahoo and, Politico and, sort of stuff like that, most of this stuff is all show. There really is no military prowess, there really isn't any global threat. But that's a pretty hefty position to be in, and to be that audacious that you won't even acknowledge the ability to disagree. I'm thinking of a better word, but I can't think of it right now, right? So, just as an example, that collapses in on itself because you recognize that, I had a point of view at one point in my life, and my point of view changed. I thought that this is where I wanted the political to go. It got there. What I thought would happen didn't manifest, and you fall into a nihilistic state of affairs. I've done far too many lectures on this to talk about it in any more detail because it's just too much information, but nihilism in its general, but political nihilism, which is where I think we are, unfortunately, in the United States. I didn't necessarily want to say that, but I will put that out there, right, and just let it be what it is. I really believe, like our political establishment in the U.S., we've entered an era of political nihilism, right? I don't even know if that is, I'm just saying that word, but I don't know that that word has the meaning that I want to give it. But, again, interested grad student, write a article on political nihilism in the 21st century in the U.S. because I think we're there, right? What in fact confronts us is a complex of interest between not few of them. Ultimate reconciliation is impossible. Direct quote, right? If it really is the case that we've entered an era of political nihilism in the United States of America, for all the complex and profound absurdity that that concept might have, it's ridiculously complex, right? It's going to be, we're going to have humongous systemic transformation in our political establishment because it's totally out of step. If it's the case, it's a big if, it's a conditional, right? If that's the case, if it's the case that we've entered a state of political nihilism, then it might not be the case. But if, conditionally speaking, it is the case that we are, in fact, in the 21st century United States of America, our government is itself nihilistic, then that means our representatives are in a position where they don't believe that they can do what they ought to be doing. That's a huge problem. If I felt like I didn't have the intelligence to lecture, it would be wrong for me to stand up here. If I felt like I didn't have the credentials, if I faked my credentials, it would be wrong for me to be up here. If I didn't know this material and I was just making it up on the fly and I didn't have any, it would be wrong for me to be up here. If you are in a position to represent your constituency and to make informed decisions on their behalf, and you've fallen into a state of nihilism, and you make those decisions on behalf of those people who put you there, it's wrong for you to be in that position. Now we need ethicists. I don't do that job, but ethicists need to come in and be like, it's wrong. It is profoundly wrong to occupy that position without the capacity that that position requires. It is profoundly wrong, right? It is wrong because your nihilism is crippling the institution of the political, and the political really needs to purge itself from those, unless you're that really nuanced nihilist that is more relativistic, right? But I'm talking about nihilism in the colloquial sense, and again, as I said, it's far too complex for me to get into it now. Watch my Nietzsche series for that. All right, I'm running out of time again, so I gotta wrap this up. Balance then is not the, this is a 2 freaking hour lecture, Jesus. I should apologize for blasphemy. It might offend some people. Balance then is not the idealist philosophies of purity, right? But a means of regulating and governing a diversity of complex of interests. Obviously, it's not about uniformity. It's not about ideological purity. It's about balance. It's a recognition. We're going to agree to disagree. That's the best thing to say. But it can't be we're going to agree to disagree and all we have is disagreement, because then nothing gets done. You have political gridlock. And thus, that gridlock can and will manifest itself as, in terms of political nihilism, and thus the destabilization of the political. These interests are balanced both internally, within the state, and externally, between the state and social. I discussed that. And then last thing, corresponding social obligation. The political philosopher, me, is obligated to ensure that the population is aware, via the video series, of potential political interests that may be antithetical to society, which was this bit that I've done and all the other bits that I do in the world. So I'm going to end there because I'm running out of time. A ton of crap, a ridiculous amount of crap, but hopefully it makes sense. So I fulfilled my obligation. We're well over the 2-hour mark, and now I will switch gears to another of my lecture series, only to return to this one at some point in the future. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell. Have a good day.